Pennsylvania German, usually called Pennsylvania Dutch, is a variety of West Central German spoken by the Amish and Old Order Mennonites in the United States and Canada, closely related to the Palatine dialects. There are possibly more than 300,000 native speakers in North America. It has traditionally been the language of the Pennsylvania Dutch, descendants of late 17th and early 18th century immigrants to Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina from southern Germany, eastern France, and Switzerland. Although for many, the term Pennsylvania Dutch is often taken to refer to the Amish and related Old Order groups exclusively, the term should not imply connection to any particular religious group. In this context, the word Dutch does not refer to the Dutch people of the descendants. Instead, it is probably left over from an archaic sense of the English word Dutch, compare German Deutsch, Dutch Deutsch, diets, which once referred to any people speaking a non-peripheral continental West Germanic language on the European mainland. Alternatively, some sources give the origin of Dutch, in this case as a corruption or a folk rendering of the Pennsylvania German endonym Deutsch. Speakers of the language today are primarily found in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and other Midwestern states of the United States, and in Ontario in Canada. Historically, the dialect was also spoken in several other regions where its use has either largely or entirely faded. The use of Pennsylvania German as a street language in urban areas of Pennsylvania was declining by the arrival of the 20th century, while in more rural areas it continued in widespread use through the World War II era. Since that time, its use has greatly declined. The exception to this decline is in the context of the Old Order Amish and Old Order Mennonite communities, and presently the members of these two groups make up the majority of Pennsylvania German speakers. Some other North and South American Mennonites of Dutch and Prussian origin speak what is actually a Low German dialect, referred to as Plattdeutsch, which is quite different from Pennsylvania German. European origins. The ancestors of Pennsylvania German speakers came from various parts of the southwest corner of the German-speaking region of Europe, mainly the Palatinate, but also including the electorate of the Palatinate, the Duchy of Baden, Swabia, Württemberg, Alsace, and Switzerland. Most of them spoke Rhine-Franconian, especially Palatinian and to a lesser degree Alemannic dialects, and it is believed that in the first generations after the settlers arrived these dialects merged. The result of the dialect leveling was a dialect very close to the Eastern dialects of Palatinian, especially the rural dialects around Mannheim, Ludwigshafen. Modern Palatine German. When individuals from the Palatinate region of Germany encounter Pennsylvania German speakers today, conversation is often possible to a limited degree. There are many similarities between the German dialect that is still spoken in this small part of southwestern Germany and Pennsylvania German. There are approximately 2,400,000 Germans in Rhine-Neckar metropolitan region speaking Palatinate German, the specific German dialect from which the Pennsylvania German is mainly derived. Writing in Pennsylvania German. Pennsylvania German has primarily been a spoken language throughout its history, with very few of its speakers making much of an attempt to read or write it. Writing in Pennsylvania German can be a difficult task, and there is no spelling standard for the language whatsoever. There are currently two primary, competing models which numerous orthographic systems have been based upon by individuals attempting to write in the Pennsylvania German language. One school tends to follow the rules of American English orthography, the other the rules of Standard German orthography. The choice of writing system is not meant to imply any difference in pronunciation. For comparison, a translation into Pennsylvania German using two different spelling systems of the Lord's Prayer, as found in the Anglican Book of Common prayer is presented below. The text in the second column illustrates a system based on American English orthography. The text in the third column uses, on the other hand, a system based on Standard German. The English original is found in the first column, and a Standard German version appears in the fifth column. Of the Lord's Prayer most likely to have been used by Pennsylvania Germans would have been derived in most cases from Martin Luther's translation of the New Testament. Pennsylvania German publications. Since 1997, the Pennsylvania German newspaper Hiverweed River allows dialect authors to publish Pennsylvania German poetry and prose. Hiverweed River is published by Michael Werner twice a year, since 2013 in cooperation with the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center at Kutztown University. In 2014, Jehovah's Witnesses began to publish literature in Pennsylvania German. Comparison with Standard German. Pennsylvania German reflects the origins of the early speakers from the regions along the Upper Rhine River in the Rhineland, Württemberg, Baden, Saarland, Switzerland and the Alsace. Pennsylvania German sounds much like the Swabian and Alemannic dialects of these regions. Alemannic is very much alive in the Swiss form of German. Much of Pennsylvania German's difference from Standard German can be summarized as consisting of a simplified grammatical structure, several vowel and consonant shifts that occur with a fair degree of regularity, as well as a variety of lexical differences. The influence of American English upon grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation is also significant. Grammar as in Standard German. Pennsylvania German uses three genders. Pronouns inflect for four cases, as in Standard German, but the nominative and accusative articles and adjective endings of the same, e.g., der in Pennsylvania German does not become den, unlike in High German. As in other South German and West German dialects, the genitive is often replaced by a special construction using the dative and the possessive pronoun. The man's dog becomes a man sei Hund. In most regions, the dative has been gradually replaced by the accusative, so that a man sei Hund, for example, has frequently become der Mann sei Hund. Adjectival endings exist but are somewhat simplified compared to Standard German. As in all other South German dialects, the past tense is generally expressed using the perfect ich bin ins Feld gelaufen rather than the simple past. The use of the subjunctive, while it exists, is more limited than in Standard German. Several Pennsylvania German grammars have been published over the years. A few examples are A Simple Grammar of Pennsylvania Dutch by J. William Frey and Elsie Higgs, A Pennsylvania German Reader and Grammar. Pronunciation. The list below appears to use IPA symbols to represent sounds used in Standard German, with an arrow pointing to a sound found to at times be its Pennsylvania German equivalent. Following each of these entries is an example of a related word from Standard German, once again with an arrow pointing to its modern Pennsylvania German counterpart. Vowels O and GT. Example: cough and GT, cat. O and GT. E. Example: Sean and GT, she. And GT. Example: done and GT, din. Y and GT. I. Example: Ku and GT, kia. A and GT. O. Example: schlafen and GT, schluff. A. From Middle High German. O and GT. Example: Ausch and GT, AA. A. From Middle High German. U and GT. A. Example: Bauer and GT, Bauer and GT. A. Example: Neu and GT, nay. O and GT. Example: bod is thus pronounced somewhat like the American butter, but without the final R. In contrast, the first vowel of Buddha rhymes with the American took. final I that corresponds with German E in that position is retained from Middle High German Y and GT. Eine gute Frau and GT, E gute Frau. Consonants V and GT, V or W, depending whether the preceding vowel is short or long. Example, Kubel and GT, Keywell and GT, J. Example, Morgan and GT, Moya. For speakers with an Americanized R sound, the J can disappear, often becomes silent between vowels. Example, Sagan and GT, Saj. Since the letter G has been retained by so many past writers, this sound was presumably pronounced as it before it disappeared. K and GT. Example, Klein and GT, Gli. Final N generally disappears, including in infinitives. Example, and GT, P and GT, B in many words. Example, and GT, PF and GT, P. Example, P Fara and GT, Para. Final R after a vowel is even more strongly vocalized than in modern High German, so that Buddha is pronounced *Buddha. It often disappears entirely from both spelling and pronunciation, as in Hertz and GT. Haas. R in all other positions was originally rolled, except for with some Amish, who tended to gutturalize it as in modern High German. Today most speakers have migrated to have an American, at least in part, second and GT before P or T, even at the end of a word. Example, Bist and GT, Bisht. Second in all other locations is never voiced T and GT, D, especially initially and when followed by R or a vowel. Example, Tot and GT, Butter and GT, Butter. W is for many speakers a rounded sound midway between a German and English W. This does not apply to German B sounds that become W and WW, which tend to be a true German W. Other speakers use a German W more consistently. Final TS and GT per second with some speakers. Example, and GT. In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, there have been numerous other shifts that can make the Pennsylvania German particularly difficult for modern High German speakers to understand. A word beginning in GS generally becomes TS, so the German Gesund and GT, Gsund and GT, Sund and German GESA GT and GT, GSAAT and GT, SAT. Likewise, German Gescheit and GT, Scheid and GT, T-Scheid. German Zurich and GT, Zedrick and GT, Srick. The softened W after guttural consonants has mixed with the guttural R of earlier generations and also turned into an American R, so that German Gusen and GT, G West and GT, Grest and German Geschwind and GT, Schwind and GT, Chetrind. These changes in pronunciation, combined with the general disappearance of declensions as described above, result in a form of the language that has evolved considerably from its early Pennsylvania origins nearly 300 years ago. Adoption of English vocabulary. The people from southern Germany, eastern France and Switzerland, from whom the Pennsylvania German culture and language sprang, started to arrive in America in the late 17th and early 18th centuries, before the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. To a more limited extent, this is also true of a second wave of immigration in the mid-19th century, which came from the same regions, but settled more frequently in Ohio, Indiana, and other parts of the Midwest. Thus, an entire industrial vocabulary relating to electricity, machinery and modern farming implements has naturally been borrowed from the English. For Pennsylvania German speakers who work in a modern trade or in an industrial environment, this could potentially increase the challenge of maintaining the mother tongue. Numerous English words have been borrowed and adapted for use in Pennsylvania German since the first generations of Pennsylvania German habitation. of southeastern Pennsylvania. Examples of English loanwords that are relatively common are "at," "depend," "chap" for chap or guy, and "chum" for djum. Today, many speakers will use Pennsylvania German words for the smaller numerals and English for larger and more complicated numbers, like $27,599. Pennsylvania Dutch English. Conversely, although many among the earlier generations of Pennsylvania Germans could speak English, they were known for speaking it with a strong and distinctive accent. Such Pennsylvania Dutch English can still sometimes be heard to this day, although this more recently coined term is being used in the context of this and related articles to describe this Pennsylvania German-influenced English. It has traditionally been referred to as Dutchy or Dutchified English. Survival. Pennsylvania German, which is now in its 4th century on North American soil, had more than 250,000 speakers in 2012. It has shifted its center to the west with approximately 160,000 speakers in Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, and other Midwest states. There is even a small but growing number of Pennsylvania German speakers in Upper Baton Creek and Springfield in Belize among Old Order Mennonites of the Noah Hoover group, while speakers without an Anabaptist background in general are not passed the language to the children today. The Old Order Amish and Old Order Mennonites are so in the current generation, and there are no signs that this practice will end in the future. Even though Amish and Old Order Mennonites were originally a minority group within the Pennsylvania German-speaking population, today they form the vast majority. According to sociologist John A. Hostetler, less than 10% of the original Pennsylvania German population was Amish or Mennonite. There have been efforts to advance the use of the language. Kutztown University offers a complete minor program in Pennsylvania German Studies. The program includes 2 full semesters of the Pennsylvania German language. In the 2007-2008 school year, the classes were being taught by Professor Edward Quinter. In 2008-2009, Professor Robert Lush served as the instructor. Since 2005, Pennsylvania Germans have been working on a Pennsylvania German version of Wikipedia. According to one scholar, today, almost all Amish are functionally bilingual in Pennsylvania Dutch and English. However, domains of usage are sharply separated. Pennsylvania Dutch dominates in most in-group settings, such as the dinner table and preaching in church services. In contrast, English is used for most reading and writing. English is also the medium of instruction in schools and is used in business transactions and often, out of politeness, in situations involving interactions with non-Amish. Finally, the Amish read prayers and sing in Standard or High German at church services. The distinctive use of 3 different languages serves as a powerful conveyor of Amish identity. Quote, "Although the English language is being used in more and more situations, nonetheless Pennsylvania Dutch is one of a handful of minority languages in the United States that is neither endangered nor supported by continual arrivals of immigrants. Since it is an isolated language and almost all native speakers are bilingual in English, the biggest threat to the language is gradual decay of the traditional vocabulary, which is then replaced by English loanwords or words corrupted from English. Speaker population. In Ontario, Canada, the Old Order Amish, most Old Order Mennonites, and smaller pockets of others speak Pennsylvania German. There are, however, far fewer speakers of Pennsylvania German in Canada than in the United States. In the United States, most Old Order Amish and most horse and buggy Old Order Mennonite groups speak Pennsylvania German. There are, however, exceptions. There are several Old Order Amish communities where Bernese German, a form of Swiss German and Alsatian, not Pennsylvania German, are spoken. Additionally, English has almost completely replaced Pennsylvania German among the Old Order Mennonites of Virginia. Other religious groups among whose members the Pennsylvania German language would have once been predominant include Lutheran and German Reformed congregations of Pennsylvania German background, Schwenkfelders, and Schwarzenau Brethren. Until fairly recent times, the speaking of Pennsylvania German had absolutely no religious connotations. As of 2014, there were 290,100 Old Order Amish, and as of 2008, there were 60,000 to 80,000 Old Order Mennonites. Both groups have a growth rate of more than 3% a year. This would count up to a total Old Order Amish and Old Order Mennonite population of at least 370,000 as of 2015. There are also attempts being made in a few communities to teach the language in a classroom setting. However, as every year passes by, fewer and fewer in these particular communities speak the language. There is still a weekly radio program in the dialect whose audience is made up mostly of these diverse groups, and many Lutheran and Reformed congregations in Pennsylvania that formerly used German have a yearly service in Pennsylvania German. Other non-native speakers of the language include those persons that regularly do business with native speakers. Among them, the Old Order Amish population is probably around 227,000. Additionally, the Old Order Mennonite population, a sizable percentage of which is Pennsylvania German-speaking, numbers several tens of thousands. There are also thousands of other Mennonites who speak the language, as well as thousands more older Pennsylvania German speakers of non-Amish and non-Mennonite background. The Grundsaw Lodge, which is an organization in southeastern Pennsylvania of Pennsylvania German speakers, is said to have 6,000 members. Therefore, a fair estimate of the speaker population today might be approaching 300,000, although many, including some academic publications, may report much lower numbers, uninformed of those diverse speaker groups. The number of Amish community members is not easy to estimate. In many cases, what is referred to as the Amish population represents only the baptized members of the community, which does not include younger members of the communities in the mid-20s or younger. A better estimate is achieved on the basis of the number of GMANA and the average size of each GMA church district. Furthermore, while there are large communities of speakers in the states of Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, there are smaller speaker groups found in and outside those states, and in Canada, scattered among English speakers. There are no formal statistics on the size of the Amish population, and most who speak Pennsylvania German on the Canadian and U.S. censuses would report that they speak German, since it is the closest option available. Pennsylvania German was reported under ethnicity in the 2000 census. Example: in Mario P's book Language for Everybody, a popular poem in the dialect is printed, freely translated as "in popular culture." The office character Dwight Schrute and his family, including his cousin Mose, are frequently mentioned to be speakers of Pennsylvania German. Although Schrute works in the titular office, he also owns and operates an Amish-style beet farm and often alludes to his family's long Pennsylvania German heritage.